Okay, so what I've done is I've just got a normal milk container and I've cut a strip out of the back of it. That's all I've done with that. So I've got this little soft plastic strip. All I'm going to do is just get texture. I'm just going to draw a little line. Yeah, let's make it into a little cross just for fun. Okay. So, got a little strip of paper with a little black mark on it. Well, not paper, plastic. And what I'm going to do is this is very soft. So what we can do is this is going to provide a contrast for our camera to focus on, and it's only going to be what, you know, a mil or two away from exactly where we want it. So it's going to be very, very close. It's going to be very usable. So now let's try it on the paint. Alright, so got my little point and shoot here, and I'm going to try and take a photograph of this swirl. Now, it's quite difficult if I get it to focus on and bring it up for review. See if I just get it. It's kind of hard to see on this camera screen, but it's focused on the lights. You can't see if there's any swirl there at all, and it'd be quite frustrating for people. You know, it's frustrating for me. So now I get my little tool. I got my camera here. So I'll put my tool, let's set my camera back to take photos. Set my tool down where I want it. Now if I press my trigger halfway, it actually is going to focus, and then I take my bit of plastic away and I take the photo, and I've actually got a really good photo. Oops. Turn this around so I can see. Oh gee, it's not going to focus on my camera. So I've actually got quite a good photo of swirls there compared to the previous shot. Which looks swirl free because it's focused on the wrong thing. Whoops. So you can actually see all the swirls quite easily. I'll put the full size images on the video, but it just goes to show you how this can work for you. So the way the system works, well, pretty much every camera works like this that I've ever come across. So you line up where you want to take the shot, you put your bit of plastic on there, you hold the trigger down halfway until it focuses on your bit of plastic and you can see your plastic clearly. Right, so you're holding the trigger halfway, you pull a bit of plastic away, and you take your photo, and that's a pretty good photo. It's got lots of the swirls in it. If I can get it to my video camera to focus on, it's got a lot of swirls in it, you know, and that's what you want. You know, whereas if we go back a couple of pictures without it, there's nothing. It looks like the paint's perfect. So that's just a little quick sort of tool that you can use. You know, I mean, this car is actually in pretty bad condition, and I'm struggling to take pictures without, you know, the use of like a little tool or something. You know, I've had some cars like that have been bright red, and they've had really, really bad marring on the side, and the camera can pick it up pretty easy because the swirls sort of appear white when they reflect light. You know, like it's like the clear coat scratches that reflect white. But white on white is quite difficult, and these scratches on it are pretty bad. And but even, you know, just using something really simple and a little point and shoot, I can get pretty decent shots of them. Like I was saying, when I see shots that are focused on the lights, you know, you can see how much that masked all of the swirls on it. I mean, the swirls are epically bad, and yet by focusing on the light and not on the surface of the paint, you almost can't see they're there at all. So yeah, I hope that little tool helps you out. You know, I mean, if you've got an old milk carton around and a texter, you're pretty good. So obviously on the side of the car we put the lights away from us, shining back towards us again. That's going to show up the swirls the best. Now obviously getting photos of the lower edge of the panel is fairly difficult because there's not much light in these big lights. Oops. Big lights can't get to them. So I've got this little portable LED light, put down quite low and turn it on, and then that gives me quite a low reflection. You can see the extra reflections down on the bottom. I'd just like to quickly point out that this method is just as good for your digital SLR as it is for a point and shoot. You know, if I try and focus on a swirl with this digital SLR, it's found the focus of the light, hasn't found the focus of the swirl at all. Same thing, you know, it's looking for this exact same thing that the other camera's looking for. So I'll put this on there, finds it really quickly, pull it away, take a photo. So I don't know if I can get this camera to, everything's backwards because I've got the screen turned around. It's quite difficult. You know, if you've got focus lights like that, that's bad. Should be blurry like that, because now you can see the surface of the paint. I'll put the full-size images up in the video. Alright, so it's time to look at a bit of post-production. Now, first up, I want to have a quick talk about RAW and JPEG. So, RAWs are much larger on your camera, and that's the biggest complaint that I get from people is, it takes up so much room, I can't keep as many photos. All I can say is buy a large memory card because it's worth it, and I'll show you why. So I've got a folder here just with a selection of images that I've taken. So I'm going to start with a JPEG, and I'm going to start with an underexposed JPEG. I'm going to open it with Photoshop, and I'm going to show you how little control I was. So let's just say you had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take an image, and this is how it turned out. And you're in JPEG, and you're like, oh gee, it's pretty dark, I need to adjust the brightness. So I bring the brightness up a bit to about where you want it. But it looks pretty crappy, really. Like, it's the color's crap. There's not a lot you can sort of do with it. It's very grainy and it's not nice. But if I was to come into a CR2, which is Canon's RAW, if I was to open one of these, it takes me to a pre-screen here where I can adjust my exposure afterwards. So I can actually bring the exposure right up and to about sort of there. But the other thing that's really nice is I can actually fill light, so the dark areas I can fill with light. So look at the tires, you can't see the tires there. Now I can see tires, so I can adjust that to sort of where I want it. And then the recovery is the highlights, like recovering blown highlights. So see the white on the body is adjusting down. And so I can set all these things afterwards. I can set my saturation of the colors and stuff as well. Might just be a little overexposed. Let's bring it back a little bit. And then I can open my image. And from what started out as a very dark image, I've got a nice, bright, light photo, which is great. Now you can do some things with this as well. After you've opened them into Photoshop, you can still do some things. Like I can go into hue saturation and I can adjust the saturation of my colors so that, you know, you can make it a load of black and white, or I can bring it up or down slightly later. So you're not restricted and totally bound with that forever, but you don't have the same options for bringing up underexposed photos. You know, to try and bring out any detail on that JPEG is going to be very hard, whereas on the RAW image, it's pretty good. The other thing I want to point out too is that was recovered from a very dark image. You can't get back information from an overblown image. See this area that's white? No matter how much I bring that down, although that's making a bit of a liar of me, but If this was so washed out, like bright like that, where you couldn't see any of those panel gaps anymore, you can't get that back. So you're better off underexposing a photo than you are overexposing a photo. Once the information's gone, it's gone. You're never going to get it back. Whereas at least where it's dark, you can at least lighten it back up and you'll have the information. So, you know, if this was how the photo was taken, you'd never get that information back. In this instance, there is still a bit of information there, so by bringing the exposure back down before I actually open it into Photoshop, I'm actually fairly okay. In fact, it's still probably a bit overexposed, but I can play with that later. That's just a bit of a rundown on the difference between JPEG and RAW. Yes, it's larger. Why is it larger? Because it's capturing a whole lot more data that you're not capturing with a JPEG. Whatever you've got with a JPEG, you've got. And the other thing too is JPEGs use the camera processor to compress the image to JPEG. I mean, that's why you get so many JPEGs on there, is because they're a compressed format, and it's compressing it for you with a tiny little processor that you've bought in, what, $100 camera, and like how much of that's gone into the processor? Not much. Whereas your home computer can do a much sort of better job of processing them into JPEG from RAW later. However, RAW isn't available to everybody. I understand that. So I'll just get out of this. And the other thing about RAW is that you can't preview it in Windows. You can see here that they've just got CR2 on them, and Nikon will have their own different RAWs. Whereas with the JPEGs, you can preview them. So it's not as handy. I appreciate there are drawbacks to RAW, and JPEG does have some advantages, but it certainly doesn't give you the control that RAW does. Anyway, that's a decision, that individual decision, and some people don't even have that option because their cameras don't have that functionality. So I also wanted to talk about Photoshop. Like, I'm using Bridge here to preview my RAWs, and because this is a part of Photoshop suite that you can view RAWs in. And when I double click on an image, it then takes it into Photoshop, and I can start to do all the things that I wanted to do. Now, not everyone has Photoshop. It's quite expensive. I have it as part of the cost of running my photography business, and so, you know, I'm quite happy to pay that. Other people aren't as happy to pay it, and if you're not the kind of person that downloads a copy from torrents, there is an alternative for you, which I'll show you now. The alternative is called GIMP. It's a funny name, but it stands for GNU Image Manipulation Program at the top there. Now, this is a legitimately free open source program, and it is comparable to Photoshop. It's quite powerful, and you can still do quite a lot in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this photo here, and having a look at this photo, which is a JPEG. It doesn't have much color in it, and it's a little sort of washed out. Doesn't look real great. So I'm going to do a couple of things. So GIMP's fairly similar in Photoshop with its functionality, but the menus do look quite a bit different. One thing that's nice, just right click on it and we'll go to colors, and we'll go to hue saturation. So you bring this palette off to the side, and you've got your sort of adjust selected color down here, and we can just increase the saturation a bit, just to give ourselves a bit more of that color back. That looks a bit nicer. I don't want to overdo it, but just to give ourselves a bit of extra color in here. Okay, so that's sort of given some of our color back. We can also just play around with different things. You know, we might go to brightness and contrast, and I might just tweak the contrast up slightly. Whoops, maybe not too much. Just to make it nicer. Now over here, you always have the option across here of this history tab. Undo. It's called the undo history tab. But so you can click through your different stages. So this is how the image started. I've changed the hue saturation, then I've changed the contrast. So you can sort of try your different things and see how you go. So I'm happy with the color boost, but you can see compared to that, it's very washed out still, and now it's got a nice amount of punch in it. So yeah, this image looks quite nice now, and then I can save it off. It's a good legitimately free program. Yeah, something to consider if you're chasing down an alternative to Photoshop. I'll just cut the changes. Now, one thing that I wanted to go through with you as well is just subtle manipulation of images. Now, the human eye likes a bit of contrast in their pictures, and they also like even tones and things like that. So I've got a before and after. These are images of the Polo because I haven't done the inside of the Golf yet. I've got a couple of images here of before and after, and you can sort of see down on the armrest here, I've sort of cleaned all that crap up. Now, a subtle technique that you can use to make your after shots look better than your before shots, other than the fact that you've cleaned them, is just by having them slightly darker with a slightly more contrast. So, for instance, this photo here, if I just bring up the brightness and contrast, if I just bring the brightness down slightly and just put the contrast up a little bit, not too much, it has to be fairly subtle. Already, that looks like a cleaner, neater image than that. Now, obviously, it's still got stuff in there because I haven't fixed anything. But when you're doing your before and afters, a subtle technique is just to make the after photo just a little bit less bright, and just put a little bit more contrast in it. And if anything, just a little bit more saturation. So you can go to adjustments, hue, saturation. We saw that GIMP had it, and Photoshop has it here as well. And you can just add a bit of saturation in. On these door trims, it's not going to make a huge difference because they're fairly grayscale anyway. But on a car, you're going to have that nice little difference. So yeah, one technique to get nicer after shots is just bring the brightness and contrast down slightly, or increase the contrast, bring the brightness down, and hope that explains a little bit about post-processing. Alright, finally I just wanted to share a few general photography tips when taking photos of cars. First of all, horizons. Try to get your horizons level. In the photography world, there's stacks of horizon police out there. They're all just going to be looking to check that your photo is level. If you don't want it to be level because you're being artistic, make sure it is definitely taken on an angle. Don't have like a couple of degrees and say that you did it on purpose, because most people will just think you don't know how to take a photo, the horizon's not flat. Look for vertical things in your photo. Are the telegraph poles going straight up and down? Or is the whole photo leaning over? You know, people don't like to feel like they're falling out of a photo one way or another, unless it's quite an artistic sort of angle on the car. Another thing that I would say when taking photos of cars is to focus on usually the closest, most interesting item. So on a car, people usually look at headlights. It's like when you're taking photos of people, focus on their eyes, right? Because that's what people want to see. It's like that connection to a car. Same connection is sort of done through your headlights. You know, people sort of look at them like eyes. So I always try to focus on the headlight if it's just an all-in shot of the car. Don't let it focus on the roof, because this is going to be slightly blurry at the front. Or don't let it focus on the background, because the photo's going to look terrible. The car's going to be almost completely out of focus. Make sure that when you focus, now some cameras will only focus on the center point, which makes it nice and easy. You can set the focus and then, you know, take your picture. Some are going to automatically hunt around. Now, they're supposed to look for the closest thing of highest contrast when they're focusing. So most of the time it probably will focus on that. But just check and see on your screen where it is focusing, and if it's not right, take the focus off and then try again. And the other thing I would say, just for general interest photos, are to look for the little details that are different about this car. Like, people have seen photos of cars before, so what's different about this car? Well, one of the things, if I can get in there, one of the interesting things on this Volkswagen, they put the little Volkswagen symbol on the headlight, which is pretty cool. But anyway, they're the other things, you know, like, and the Volkswagens have a huge sort of Volkswagen badge on the front. They've been quite interesting to take photos of. Obviously, you know, in here is not ideal, and I can't choose anything as far as settings are concerned while I'm inside video mode. You can get some interesting shots. Like, the background's going to look like crap because it's just my garage, but you know, if it was outside and you had a nice blue sky behind it, you know, these kind of shots look quite nice. So just have a look at overall at your car and just see what's different about this car. Like, what would people want to see about this car over another car? You know, it might be really aggressive wheel arches or body lines or something like that. Yeah. Well, anyway, just food for thought. Hope you've enjoyed my video, and I hope it might help you out as far as getting photos of what you actually want to get photos of. It's difficult getting photos of swirls, but hopefully a few of these tips and a bit of information on your camera might make a difference. So yeah, I look forward to seeing your photos, and feedback's always welcome. Cheers.